Oh, hello, AP. This is it. This is the last one of the year. I've got three headings. Trump stuff will be next year. If you've looked at any of the stuff AP's putting out, you're only responsible to World War II on the AP test. So starting next week. So, I'm going to finish this one, maybe in about 30, 40 minutes. I'm going to send you, a couple little things to think about. It's Friday, it's Wednesday night. I'm making this. I'll send it to you in the morning. But come Tuesday, we'll start reviewing for the test. And like I said, it only goes up to period 7. Nothing on the Cold War, nothing on Vietnam, the 60s, civil rights, none of that. None of the recent stuff, given, the situation that everybody finds themselves in. So I'm finishing right here. This is it as far as new material. Now, I'll look at the date of the test. Once we get past the test, and folks are not taking the test, well, you kind of got to go through the motions. I'll try to maybe set up alternate things for you, perhaps. So starting next week, we're focusing on the test, reviewing from that. So we'll review for a week, then a spring break, then we come back, and it's about, it's not any more than 3 weeks, and it may only be 2 weeks. So like 6 days of review, something like that, if it's twice a week. All right. So got to look at all of it. All right. So at any rate, okay. Let's see. What do I need to do? Presentation. Come on now. Okay. Okay, here we go. All right. So when we were last together, we looked at what? 9/11. That's the last thing we said. All right. So I don't know. Hey, let me throw. There's some like Jolly Ranchers. See if you can say that stuff, and make sure you've read the last chapter. You read the last chapter of the book. Take notes of it. Take notes on it. Okay, so Bush became controversial. The invasion of Iraq, of Afghanistan, was very popular. But other things in the war on terrorism were more controversial. All right. Okay. So one thing Congress passed was the Patriot Act because we were concerned. The government was concerned about domestic terrorists. And so they were doing surveillance of people's emails and their phone conversations. So kind of the issue of privacy, civil liberties came up. People were concerned that the government was kind of watching them. The Department of Homeland Security was created to fight terrorism. Everybody kind of understood why, but there were things that it did that was kind of controversial. Terror suspects were held at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. We got this naval base during the Spanish-American War in Cuba. And they were held without trial. So, chances are some of the people in that picture are innocent. They haven't been given a trial. The Bush administration called them enemy combatants. So said, if they got a trial, they might not get found guilty. Then you got to let them go. And then they committed an act of terrorism. So controversial place there at Guantanamo Bay. All right. So Iraq. All right, Iraq a lot more controversial than Afghanistan. So Bush made a speech called the Axis of Evil speech, and obviously, he's referencing the Axis powers in World War II. And so the three countries, the Axis of Evil was Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. And so he decides to go to war in Iraq, and it's the first time in American history that we just attack a country that hadn't attacked us. Yeah, it's kind of shady how we got involved in Vietnam with Johnson. Yeah, it's kind of shady how Polk got us involved in the Mexican-American War. And notice it always involves Texas, a Texas president or the state of Texas. But in this case, Bush just attacks this. It's called preemptive war. You attack another country before they can attack you. And his argument is if we wait till they attack us, it's going to be too late. They'll use nuclear weapons, biological weapons. You have these new groups, this new group of conservatives called neoconservatives, who are very much in favor of kind of trying to remake the world in the American image. You know, kind of turn all the Middle Eastern countries into carbon copies of the United States, whether it fit our culture, fit their culture or not. All right, so then so going into Iraq just a lot more controversial than going into Afghanistan. So there's 3 reasons for going into Iraq, and really only one of them stands up to scrutiny. Reason number 1 is the one. Hey, Saddam Hussein was a mean dictator. So, you know, mean dictators who oppress their people deserve to be overthrown. So he deserved to be overthrown. Okay, but there's a lot of bad leaders in the world. So we're going to overthrow all of them? Bush claimed that he had weapons of mass destruction. Well, he didn't. Now, Bush, I think, believed that he had weapons of mass destruction. But, you know, his intelligence was faulty on that. He was mistaken about that. All right, and then finally, Bush argued that Iraq was supporting terrorism, and there's like an implied connection with 9/11. Iraq didn't have anything to do with 9/11. Saddam Hussein was a mean guy, but he wasn't friends with Osama bin Laden. Didn't have anything to do with 9/11. So Bush used 9/11 and everybody's kind of fear of terrorism as a rationale. It's in this context that he claims we need to preemptively attack Iraq. And really the only legitimate reason is that they've got a bad dictator. All right, now Congress authorized the use of force. They supported him, but unlike with his dad, you know, H.W. Bush had this international coalition going against Iraq in 1991. The second Bush only has Britain on our side, so much more controversial internationally. Okay, let's start off well. You know, we overthrow the government in, I don't know, let's say a few months. But the problem with Iraq and Middle Eastern countries generally is you break that thing, you bought it. And so you had people in that country that didn't like each other. The Shia and the Sunni, Shia and Sunni Muslims. Maybe you studied the difference between those. It takes too long to explain, you know, last year. But it's 2 different groups of Muslims in Iraq that don't like each other. So civil war in Iraq breaks out, and we got to try to, like, contain it. And we never found weapons of mass destruction. There's really little evidence that he supported terrorism. And so we kind of get stuck in Iraq. We're kind of still there in some shape, form, or fashion. And it was a big mess, you know. We didn't lose the war like Vietnam, but, you know, like Vietnam, we kind of got stuck there. And over time, the public kind of turned against the war and the president. As a result, it became a lot less popular president. You see here that he aged a lot as president. All right, other things going on at home. Affirmative action is becoming less and less popular. You got a couple of court cases, Gratz and Grutter versus Bollinger, involving the University of Michigan. One the undergraduate program and one the law school. But both of them pretty controversial. So, I mean, affirmative action is becoming more and more controversial under Bush. All right, Bush got reelected. He defeated Massachusetts Senator John Kerry. Kerry was against the war in Iraq. But like a lot of other guys in Congress who had misgivings, he voted for the war in Iraq. He voted to support Bush when he sends troops there. So it's a pretty close election. But Bush won. He won over Kerry a little more than he won over Gore. All right, so let me stop there and give you a second to review. Okay, by the time, you know, that second term, a lot of times second terms don't go well. You know, we've talked about that with a lot of presidents. Second term for Bush didn't go well. We were torturing prisoners. waterboarding. You've got this guy. I mean, this picture right there, that you have this prison in Iraq called Abu Ghraib prison, and terror suspects are held there. People that have been fighting against us. So we put this guy on a block, on like this narrow box, and we hook up electrodes to his fingers. We put a hood over his head, and we tell him he's got to hold his hands up. If his hands drop or if he falls off the box, loses balance, he's going to get electrocuted. And so he's got to do that or else tell on all his buddies. So, I mean, the interrogation techniques were awfully rough. They didn't seem very American. And people kind of turned on Bush and they turned on the war. All right, so in 2006, Democrats took over both houses of Congress. Democrats took over the House under Trump here. In 2018, but the Democrats took over both houses of Congress. Nancy Pelosi, originally, that's when she first became Speaker of the House. She was the first female Speaker of the House of Representatives. Domestically, Bush was, remember he called himself a compassionate conservative, so he's pro-immigration in certain ways. He got 40% of the Latino vote for president. When he had run for governor of Texas, he'd gotten the majority of the Latino vote. His brother is married to a lady from Mexico. So his nieces and nephews, are part Hispanic. So he pushed for a comprehensive immigration reform that would have tightened the border, but also would have allowed at the time, 12 million undocumented immigrants to stay here. His party didn't support him on that, so he was unsuccessful. And so, we kind of know with Trump that the Republican Party's moved towards a much tougher on immigration position. All right, so in 2008, you've got an unpopular president who can't run again, and you've got an unpopular war. So things look pretty good for the Democrats. So you got this guy, Barack Obama, running for president. His mom was white. She grew up in Kansas. His father was from Kenya, so he was literally African American, an African father and a white American mother. All right, wrote a real interesting, really good book about growing up mixed race in Hawaii and his struggles with identity, called Dreams of My Father. As senator, in his political career before run for president, he was like the only Democrat who ran for president in 2008 who had been against Iraq from the get-go. And then when he gets the nomination, the housing crisis happens. The housing market tanks and the economy goes bad. So McCain, John McCain, he's a Vietnam War hero and respected by everybody. He died in the fall of 2016, I believe. And very well respected. A Vietnam War hero. Pretty awkward in his mannerisms. He had been a POW in Vietnam, and he can't straighten out his arms, so his gestures always look kind of awkward. And he picked Sarah Palin to be his running mate to appeal to women, but she wasn't a very good candidate. She didn't know the issues very well. So, I mean, Obama and Biden ran a pretty good campaign, and it was an uphill battle for McCain because you got a bad economy, you got an unpopular war. And then on top of that, Palin ended up not really helping him very much. Okay, so there's some good questions to think about. All right, I'm going to stop. Then we got one more new heading for the whole year. And then start next week, we got, kind of round 2 of, the way we approach things. Getting ready for the test, thinking about the test. I'm thinking about the test for a week. Then take spring break. Okay, so here's the Obama administration. We got one heading on Obama, and then next year in the government class, hopefully we're all together, and we'll be looking at Obama and Trump and all kinds of things involving recent politics, but we'll get plenty of Obama and we'll get plenty of Trump in government class. All right, under Obama, the government spent nearly $800 billion to improve the economy and bail out a lot of banks and businesses. In a lot of ways, it was kind of like what Hoover tried to do about the Depression, help out the businesses that were struggling. In 2010, Congress passed Obamacare. It didn't cover it had about 30 million people got health care coverage. It didn't cover everybody that didn't have health care. Originally, the idea was that there would be a government health care program that somebody could choose if they didn't like their own health care coverage or they didn't have health care coverage. But, that was called the public option. It didn't get passed. So the Obamacare program required everybody to buy insurance. And it gave financial aid to people who couldn't afford it. It was supported by doctors, supported by the American Medical Association and the drug companies, pharmaceutical industry. And so it had supporters that the healthcare plan that the Clintons tried to pass didn't have. And so for that reason, it ended up passing. Kind of controversial, but still around. Okay, foreign policy. He gradually pulls. So you kind of like the Vietnamization process. Obama's kind of like Nixon. He's gradually pulling troops out of Iraq. Now we still got troops there, so it's not over, but less troops in Iraq. And there's the picture where he's killing Bin Laden. So that's probably his biggest success in foreign policy. He ended up sending more troops to Afghanistan. Afghanistan got a little worse, probably while he was president. He supported rebels who overthrew this dictator Gaddafi in Libya, and it's almost like Saddam in Iraq. Dictators are bad guys, but then the question is, are they worse than what's going to replace them? You got almost like a state of nature with no government when you kick out a dictator. And in Syria and in Libya, ISIS comes along. And you've got in Libya this disastrous situation where Americans get killed at Benghazi, including the American ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stevens. And that really hurt Hillary Clinton when she had been Secretary of State, her when she was running for president. So, big controversy there involving Libya and ISIS and Benghazi, and ISIS getting stronger and stronger. And they maybe remember they'd cut, they'd play videos where they're cutting off people's heads. Very troubling. Okay, the economy was growing. It got better, but it's growing slowly. Iraq was a little better than it was. So in other words, the two big problems that Obama inherited that kind of helped him get elected president, when he's running for a re-election, they're a little better. They're not great, but he's made progress. The Republican runs, Mitt Romney, really rich guy, seen as a little elitist, takes a little harder line on immigration than Bush did, not nearly so hard a line as Trump does. But he talked about making things pretty unpleasant here in the United States so that undocumented immigrants would just kind of want to leave on their own. Self-deportation was his phrase there. The electorate was pretty diverse. Not as many white males. White males are a smaller percentage of the population. So given all that, Obama gets reelected. All right. Not 285 to 203. All right, there it is. So review that. Not as long as the one yesterday. I bet that's under 30 minutes. And that's the last one.